Like at Norton, like I used to think, I looked at him and I was like, you're a scared little mouse. I mean, he is a scared little mouse, but I thought he was the quietest guy in the world. Dan Norton is hands down the loudest man I've ever met in my life. Like the highest energy individual you'll ever meet. Like brilliant bloke. And you've got these perceptions of people.
Today's guest is Scottish legend Mark Robertson. He's the third most capped Scotland Sevens player of all time, scoring 106 tries, with just 3 other players from his country having breached the century mark. He played on the HSBC World Rugby 7 Series across 57 tournaments, with enough stamps in the passport to fill up a Harry Potter novel. Robertson hails from Melrose, the birthplace of Sevens rugby. He's also part of an elusive club, with his father representing Scotland in 44 test matches. Robertson is an Olympic silver medalist with Team GB, playing in the 2016 Rugby Sevens final against Fiji. In today's episode, we talk about growing up in a small town, finding one's path, the importance of goal setting and mentors, representing Scotland, the Sevens World Series, and how Great Britain managed to win a silver medal at the Olympic Games. We chat about his nickname Skinny Fat, having the worst birth date on the planet, and his current contract with Clermont in France. We hope you enjoy episode 11 with Mark Robertson.
He's so dangerous, Freddy Krueger has nightmares about him!
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Hive. I'm Dallen, Stanford, and despite my South African accent, I was fortunate enough to play rugby for the United States on the Sevens World Series.
And I'm MacDowell, a former Canadian Sevens international. Back in my playing days, I went head-to-head against Dallen in the USA.
For several years, Robin has coached international sevens for various countries, including Canada and Mexico. He's massively passionate about growing the game across the Americas through his MacDowell rugby programs at all levels. I'm currently a commentator for World Rugby, most recently broadcasting the Rugby World Cup in Japan, as well as the amazing Sevens World Series.
More than a decade later, we are teaming up to bring you insights from legendary players and coaches from around the world.
All legends have a story. The Rugby Hive podcast is here to share it.
Welcome to the Hive.
Oh, he's more dangerous than climate change!
Hello and welcome to episode 11. We get to chat to one of the great characters of World Rugby and fittingly head to Melrose, Scotland, where the beautiful game of sevens was invented in 1883 by local butchers Ned Craig and David Sanderson, who organised a fundraising event for their local club, Melrose RFC. The small club has produced many brilliant Scottish internationals, including today's guest, Mark Robertson. And interesting enough, he went head-to-head against Osea Kalinasau in the gold medal match at the Olympic Games. Osea was episode 5 on the Rugby Hive. Robertson, well, he has a bunch of legendary stories, and Robin, they're unfortunately not fitting for this episode, but if you happen to catch the great man in a bar somewhere around the world, you'll be laughing for hours. You and I remember playing against him on the Sevens World Series way back when, and I had a chance to work with him at the Vancouver Sevens last year in the commentary booth. He's extremely funny. He's always in for a good time. He really is a top boy chief.
Yeah, just a classic Scotsman, as smooth as it gets, and just so happy for him that him and his young family have settled in southern France, right in the heart of wine country. But some of the highlights for me on this podcast was just his insights on what it was like coming up. And, as we say, every legend has a story. We're here to share it. And his story was, he out of the gates as a young man wasn't the alpha, wasn't the top player coming out of his region. And at one point in his later teens, an old boy tapped him on the shoulder, and it sent him on a course for greatness. And, ultimately finished his career with Great Britain and a silver medal at the Olympic Games. So just class all around.
Yeah, we always love an underdog story, And my friend, speaking about rugby and being busy, your side looked absolutely sensational this past weekend.
Yeah, it's gone from 0 to 100. I couldn't be happier, but also my hair's on fire again. So our MacDowell Rugby Academy kicked off this last week in Saskatchewan, actually yesterday, and we had record number of registrations. And the thing that warms my belly the most is that the majority of the athletes are from 11 to 14, right in that target age category, and they're all crossover athletes, so they'd never touched a rugby ball before yesterday, and they had a great time. And we've also invited on Amanda Ruler, who's Saskatchewan's most famous figure, basically. She's played every sport. She's played American football for Team Canada. I think she's even played in the LFL in the USA. She's done luge, she's done bobsled, she's done skeleton, and she wants to take a run at international rugby here. So Brett Canterberg, our academy coach, has been training her during COVID one-on-one, and she's in exchange for these rugby lessons, she's teaching our rugby athletes how to run properly. So that's been great. And then as I've been kind of touching on each week, we've had a number of these Saskatchewan stars that are transitioning to first year university, as well as a grade 12 high school. And I got to work with them a bit yesterday. So that's been magic. And our local club here, the Couch and Rugby Club, they just kicked off this past week too, junior boys and junior women. So, things were looking dire for a long time, but so happy to see rugby fired up on Vancouver Island.
I'm so happy as well to see you get going that side and get outside and help the next generational players. Then also off the field, though, you took to the high seas with Big John Tate.
Yeah, John's been itching to fill his freezer with salmon. Although we didn't fill him, he was playing salmon all day on Vancouver Island here, and it was a pretty smoky day. We have a lot of wildfires in California and Washington and southern Vancouver Island. So sending our prayers to all those out there to keep safe. But we were able to sneak out on the water and had a great day. And he had a couple big boys on the line that he got to place. So that was a lot of fun. And he ended up going home with 8-9 good-sized crab for his wife Tiffany's birthday. So happy birthday to Tiffany Tate out there. But we had a great day. What did you guys get up to?
Oh, that's special times, my friend, indeed. And just touching on those fires, as you mentioned as well, yeah, definitely our thoughts go down to folks in California and Oregon and all over. Crazy fires and smoke that is disturbing people's, lungs and all that sort of stuff. You thought coronavirus was bad enough, and then this got added to it as well. So that's pretty crazy. But for us, we're lucky to this side. We got some different weather, a change of climate for us, fall conditions in Massachusetts. So we went out and got the pumpkins and stuff like that. And Verity was on fire about decorating the house and getting it looking ready. So, and then on the rugby news side of interest, our friends down under in Australia will be hosting the 2020 Rugby Championship. So that'll be interesting to see how they get on that side. And the Autumn Nations Cup taking place in the UK will feature the regular Six Nations sides. Plus, it'll be Fiji and Georgia taking part this November, December. So it's really exciting to see, particularly Fiji, the flair, the stepping, the shut the gates, to keep the change. That's all we come to love. And then personally, this week I had a chat to the rugby team at Wheaton College, just providing some advice for their players to manage their emotional state during this time and what they can work on during the pandemic on their own. I also had a chat with the broadcasting side of things with the Texas Rugby Union, providing insight to what a commentator goes through on a weekly basis. Obviously, Robin, that seems like a long, long time ago, and I don't know when we're going to get back to the commentary world in itself. But the big news, though, coming out of the news this week is the potential game changer in North America. It's either Rugby USA and Rugby Canada, or one, maybe USA, hosting the Rugby World Cup in 2027, 2031. Could be absolutely brilliant.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm hoping and praying that we lock it in as far as North America goes. If Canada gets a piece of it, great. But even just the U.S., because obviously as I say every week, we're the neighbors to the north looking over the fence, and it's just everybody wins. Much like when the U.S. hosted the 2018 World Cup Sevens, so many people tuned in from Canada and were asking about it, and I connected with people that weren't even rugby people that flew down just to watch. And took it in. So the more rugby, especially at a World Cup of that stage, who would have thought that North America would be taken over? And I'm really excited about that too.
Yeah, that's going to be absolutely brilliant. I remember 100,000 fans steaming in the gates going wild, my friend. Any thank yous or shout outs for this week?
No shout outs from my end, but how about you?
Excellent week yet again on the socials. So I'll say wonderful to see the Rugby Hive in the rankings, number 2 in Canada, 3 in the USA, and topping the charts in Brazil, South Africa, and France. I know we're in Hong Kong as well. We're kind of getting around, which is brilliant to see. We had a wonderful giveaway as well. Congrats to our winners, Stephen Swanson, who won a case of wine from the legends at Spider Pig Wines, as well as Jock Loftus, no relation to the rugby field. He's actually the human. And he walked away with a sensational Springbok trucker hat, all generously donated by David Wibley from the frying pan that is Spider Pig Wines. Do want to thank our partners, Yeti, the best outdoor brand in the world, and Gilbert Rugby North America. And our listeners, make sure you share our podcast, give us a 5-star review, and follow us on our socials at Rugby Hive on Twitter and Facebook, at My Rugby Hive on Insta. Time now for episode number 11. Extremely special guest with one of my favorite accents from Scotland. Mark, thanks for joining us, pal. How are you keeping, my friend?
Oh, very well. I'm enjoying the French culture, and as I showed you earlier, the Vin Rouge. No, I'm well. I'm over coaching in Clermont at the moment, which started in July last year, which has been a huge challenge with the language. As you can tell, I've got a very strong Scottish tongue, but it's been an awesome experience purely because it's been a huge challenge. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, so Robin was asking earlier, how fluent are you in French?
Definitely not fluent, but I have worked hard at it. I'll generally do 2 hours a day of French. You have to. I mean, to begin with, when I came over, I didn't speak a word of French, but the problem was, when I arrived, I did an introductory speech, and I wrote out 3 paragraphs and got a fluent French speaker to obviously make sure it made sense. And I memorized that word for word, and obviously did this talk right at the start, 3 paragraphs for 6, 7. Everybody's like, this guy speaks French already. And then afterwards they were speaking to me, and I was like, pardon? Spoke not a word. I didn't even understand what I was saying. I felt like Will Ferrell in Old School. It just happened, and you woke up.
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And it's tricky for you too, because English is your second language as well, right?
No, it's but I'm loving learning it, because it's a beautiful language. You know, it is a really nice language to learn, and I've got a couple of really good teachers as well. So, and you're constantly forced to try and coach in it, and obviously it helps because the players are rinse you all the time. They just constantly take the mick, which is part and parcel of rugby, isn't it? So you learn quick that way.
Oh, it's a beautiful culture indeed, you know. So, pal, tell me, your birthday is December 31st, right? So that just intrigued me because I know what an outgoing animal you are. So normally that warrants a big party. Does that mean that you have some of the craziest birthday stories from years gone by?
Now, I love this question, you know, because I read it beforehand. And the great thing is, Dallen, you've not done your research. It's the complete opposite, okay? Dallen, my birthday is the 30th of December, which is possibly the worst birthday you could possibly have. So, first of all, you've got Christmas. When you're a kid, you get all these presents, everybody spends their money, and then it gets to the 30th, and nobody really wants to buy another present because everybody's skint, they've not been paid yet. Second of all, obviously, everybody's getting excited about New Year, so you invite everybody to your party. Everybody's like, can you not just wait till tomorrow night and celebrate tomorrow? So, in all honesty, the 30th is probably the worst birthday you could possibly have. So, thanks for rubbing it in, mate.
I'm so sorry, pal. So sorry. I'm going to go whoever made that Wikipedia page about you and just crap them out.
Yeah. My birthday parties weren't great, but I've had a few good New Year's Eves as everybody has.
Well, let's start at the beginning. What was it like to grow up in Melrose, Scotland?
Melrose was a funny place to grow up. I'll give you a sort of picture. For 365 days of the year, when you're walking down the street in Melrose, you're pretty lucky to bump into one man and his dog. But as you guys well know, every second Saturday in April, the place explodes into life. 12 to 15,000 people come from all over the world in this tiny little stadium to watch what is known as the Melrose Sevens, where Sevens obviously started. So when you're growing up in Melrose, all you want to do is play in the Melrose Sevens, because Dallen, being a South African yourself, I mean, we had say Bobby Skinstad playing, Brayton Paulsa, which was unbelievable. I played the final against Stellenbosch, and what was the guy's name that he wore the scrum cap? He fair few caps for South Africa on the wing. Tiny guy.
Let's see, Gio Aplon?
Gio Aplon.
Yeah, stepper of note. Wow.
Oh my word, he was unbelievably quick. So he played against him for Stellenbosch. They've had amazing Fijian teams there, obviously. Ponsonby, New Zealand as well. At the time, they were putting out 36 teams. You know, one of the biggest clubs in the world. As I say, growing up there was cool because we had a lot of internationals as well. When I was 7, 8, 9 years old, the Melrose team had 13 Scottish internationals in it, and you know they would go through the whole season without losing a game.
Yeah, see, I'm amazed at such a place that's so small, producing so many quality players over the years. You know, but let's talk about something that's always fascinated me: the weird and wonderful sports that you guys have in the Highlands of Scotland. Did you take part in any growing up, and can you explain some of them?
Nothing. I can't explain a thing to you about the Highlands. We're more English, and I would never class myself as English, never. But we're closer to England than we are to the Highlands because we're in the borders, which is obviously the borders between England and Scotland, right in the south of Scotland. Generally, it's aliens that play the Highland Games. It's not real humans, but I've never seen it. I've never watched it in life.
You've never seen it. And so I find that hard to believe. I thought every Scotsman has to do at least one of them, whether it's throwing an axe into a tree or something. Nothing. Oh,
I've thrown a fair few axes, but not to do a whole Highland Games, you know. Nothing to do with that. No, but I've genuinely never watched a Highland Games. I've never even watched it on the TV.
Mark, I'm disappointed.
Mainly because I'm built like a skinny fat man, so I'd be bloody terrible at it. You know?
Exactly.
What do you mean exactly? Give me a break here.
It's built like a skinny fat man. Dallen, you're going to have to throw that into your next commentating gig.
I'd like to say I came up with it, but one of my mates called me it. So, remember, a guy, you'll maybe know a guy, the guy Roddy Grant, Dallen.
Yeah, I do.
He played for Edinburgh, South African guy. He went to Hilton College. Well, he's my best mate, and obviously we're like that all the time.
Top man. And, I'm actually going to message him for some more one-liners about you because that was golden.
Yeah, well, he's got a fair few, but he gets a lot back. The fact that he was ginger, born in Botswana. I mean, my best man speech for him was absolutely loaded. It was easy.
Classic.
So when did your dreams of representing Scotland begin?
That goes back to Melrose. I mean, as a youngster, when you're exposed to the likes of Craig Chalmers and Brian Redpath and Rowan Shepherd, all these international players, and obviously my old man playing for Scotland as well, I kind of grew up perhaps somewhat arrogantly thinking I'm just going to play for Scotland. It's weird how things work, because I was good as a kid, like as a primary school kid. I won the races and I was athletic and good at rugby. But then when I got into high school, everybody grew a lot faster than me. And I got to the age of 19, I've been thinking that I would play for Scotland and Melrose. And at the age of 19, rather than playing at the Melrose Sevens, I was standing on the touchlines, making an absolute disgrace of myself, in all honesty. I'm not going to tell you what I was doing, but at the time I couldn't even get into the seconds team. Melrose only had 3 teams, and the thirds team, guys would probably be able to get in the team with 3 toes, 3 toes and 3 fingers. But like, I was in the thirds. But funnily enough, you have a little turning point to your life. So this is at 19, and there was a guy, Stuart Henderson, who was really respected at the club, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Mark, what are you doing playing in the seconds? Why are you standing on the touchlines getting pissed with your mates when you could be out playing on the main pitch? It's all you've ever wanted to do." He said, "Next year, make sure you're out there doing that." And it's funny how you can have little turning points, because from there, I set myself a couple of physical challenges and targets over the course of 12 weeks in the off-season, and I saw huge progressions. The biggest goal I had was I wanted to play for the first in the first game of the season. First game of the season came along and I played for the firsts. From there, you know what it's like when you set yourself targets and goals, you just grow in confidence. And as the season went, I got better and better and better, and then finally the sevens came round again at the age of 20. And I was in this team where genuinely it was a really competitive tournament, and we had a pretty average team. We were put in the first round, and nobody thought we'd get very far. We won the first round, and we won the second round, and we won the quarter final against Newcastle, and then we played a really strong Watsonians team. Remember, like Colin Gregor and Andrew Turnbull?
Yeah.
They were in that, and they were brilliant. Like, as youngsters, rapid, brilliant players. And we beat them, and then finally we got to the final against the Stellenbosch team. And this Stellenbosch team had 7 wingers in their starting 7. We were 24-0 up at half time. 24-0 up. Second half kicks off. I'd scored 2 tries in the first half. Second half kicks off, and we're on their line. The guy, one of my mates, Graham Dodds, he just has to pass it to me, and I'm in between the posts, and we're 30-odd points up. He goes himself, double movement. They get penalised. We get penalised. Stellenbosch tap. They run the length. Go again. They run the length. They run the length. They run the length. They run the length. And we get to full time, and they beat us 42 points to 24. And honestly, it was one of the worst feelings of my life. But at the same time, it was the best. It was better than the Olympics. It was the most amazing experience to play in front of your family and friends. And the thing that made it for me, when I'd been such a massive disappointment, I remember going up and collecting my silver medal, and it was one of those things, you see your old boy. I saw my old boy, and he just gave me this nod and a wink, and I could see he was crying. And that is the most amazing experience of my life, and my best rugby memory. And it goes back to being at Melrose, and I think from that point on, I sort of believe that, if you can progress that far over the course of a year, then let's see how far we can go. So that's where I sort of started to believe that I could play for Scotland.
It often just needs that one person to tap you on the shoulder, and guaranteed that person that tapped you, somebody tapped his shoulder, and I'm sure you probably tapped a few dozen shoulders, and away you go. Because we never fully realize our potential until somebody unlocks it, right?
No, exactly. I completely agree with that. And I think we never fully realize our potential anyway, because nobody is confident enough to 100% back themselves all the time. But what you do get better at when you get the little victories, you back yourself more and more and more and more and more. Dan Stanford's one of those mans. He backs himself a hell of a lot. I love it. I love it.
On and off the field. You mentioned your father, Keith, who represented Scotland 44 times during the late 70s and throughout the 80s. have you seen many of his international games on videotapes, or what do you remember of those days?
Yeah, I've seen a fair few. Obviously, not loads. Like I've gone on YouTube, and my mum had videos of him and stuff, and watching the Melrose Sevens. The funny thing was that year he was at the same age as me, 20, when we lost, and that was his first year winning the Melrose Sevens. So obviously it would have been a huge thing to do it, but. I mean, like remember watching him play against Campese scoring in the corner in the final play of the game. My old man was 34, his last year at the Sevens, and he was a better player than me. He was like he just made stuff happen. He was light. He was 11.5 stone back then. We talk about rugby being smaller, but his first international cap was against a 16 stone Kiwi winger. You know, that's a big unit back then against 11.5 stone. My old man used to put weights into his pockets to make him up to 12.5 stone for the programme. But he was just a whippet, but similar to me, not straight line, crazy rapid, but he had a lot of balance, a lot of movement. His vision was very good, and good skills. So it was good to watch him, but it was hard shoes to fill.
Oh, well, but that's the tricky part, right? Growing up in any family where, you know, you have somebody like that to look up to. But let's go into your 15s career, right? So your first professional club was with Edinburgh Rugby, and what memories come to mind?
Well, I started at the Borders, so I was at uni still. I was doing my undergrad degree at the Borders, and then they said, do you fancy coming? And at the time they were like, I was a student, as you can imagine. Wednesdays were big. You know, Wednesdays were big and Saturdays were big, sometimes Thursdays. And they said, would you like to come on a academy contract? And I was like, well, yeah, maybe, yeah. And then they said, oh, and it's not all about money, but I would have went anyways. But then they were like, oh, we'll give you 12 grand a year. And at the time I was getting like a loan as well, a student loan, which took me up to 18. Then I got a wee bursary, which took me to 20. So as a student, I was absolutely rolling in it. But I ended up playing the first 12 games of the season in front of the obviously senior wingers. And then from there, I got offered a professional contract from Edinburgh. And Edinburgh was a mixed one. My first year, I wasn't fit because I'd torn my groin at Murrayfield, and I never got fit. I got fit for the last game, played the last game. Then I had 2 really good years with them where I played most weeks, week in, week out, and obviously was on the fringes of the Scotland squad and stuff, and fair few A-caps. And then in my 4th year, I did my groin again, and then I was forced. I had 2.5 years out, so I didn't play for 2.5 years then. I obviously it was my Achilles heel, my adductor and my psoas, the deep hip flexors. So I actually came over to America and went to St. Vincent Sports Performance and spent some time there. And that's where I got into the S&C side of things, actually, because I went there during the NFL and NBA lockout. So a lot of their athletes were there and got to shadow what they were doing and really enjoyed it. But I eventually got my groin back to a stage where it could play. But by that point, I'd made the decision to go to 7s. 15s was tough to get into. And my next opportunity to go to 15s was in 2015, the year before the Olympics. I was offered by Glasgow. And at that stage, I had one thing in mind. And I wanted to play in the Olympics, you know, because you want to do something that nobody's really done before. I knew my career was coming to an end, so I thought I'm going to go for that.
And we'll get into that in a bit, because you're right, that's something that every athlete wants to do, and it's kind of different, obviously, with your setup with Great Britain, right? Other countries, if you're playing on the Sevens World Series and you're good enough, that's your team that'll play, right? So we'll get to that in a second, But let's go back to your 15s. I'm sure there were a couple of weekends you guys went and traveled and played in away sides. Were there any stories, any one particular story that stands out that you are able to share with us?
The stories are a tough one because you're always going to land people in it, aren't you? And I wouldn't do that.
Well, we've had some head-to-heads. So some guys that either coached each other or played together, and that way they can just expose each other live.
One of the best ones I had was obviously. It helps, but the first time we won Twickenham in 2016, we all went into this bar, and the Welsh were there, and the Australians were there, and it was just blokes, and there was no music there, and it was like old school rugby that the Scots would sing a song, then the Welsh would sing a song, then the Aussies would sing a song, and the honey badger was there. And to be fair to him, he was absolutely brilliant. He was brilliant energy. He sang a bundle of songs, but that was probably one of my favourite memories.
So let's switch back to sevens here. When was your debut on the World Series, and can you describe your first weekend?
My debut was in Wellington. That was in Wellington. You guys would know it was off the charts. They had the parade on the Thursday, thousands of people on the streets. And then at the actual stadium, 36,000 people. They sold it out in an hour or so. We played 2000 and I think it was 2006. My first tournament in Wellington. But back then, I mean, it was very much the best 7 played in the first 2 games, because the first 2 games were against the stronger teams, and then the third team was usually a weaker team. It was almost a given back then, like say Kenya and stuff were almost a given, and we played Niue, so my first cap was against Niue. I don't know what I was thinking, because when it came to kicking, I did have kind of 2 left feet, but I my first try against Niue with a little left-footed grubber down the side, and picked it up and scored. But it was a funny one back then. I didn't, when you're a youngster back then, there was a lot of hierarchy in your squads, and I'd got to be honest, I didn't enjoy it that much, because you weren't made to feel really comfortable and free to say and do what you want. You had to kind of earn it, which I agreed to a point, but like that was where me and Whitey were completely different, because of the experience I had when the youngsters came into the squad. I tried to make them feel as confident as they possibly could, because then they're confident on the pitch, they know that you're backing them, and they can rinse you and they can have fun as long as they know that you're holding them accountable on the pitch. As long as they do what they said they were going to do and what you bought into, then you want the youngsters to have an awesome time when you're away on tour. And I certainly didn't have that to begin with. I mean, they're good guys, but I just didn't, a bit in your shell, a bit shy. Whereas as the years went on, I loved it.
Was that the year that they went to overtime against us? You guys broke our hearts.
I honestly can't remember. It was the only thing I can remember was Fiji beating South Africa in extra time, and Willie Ryder in extra time dancing before he put the ball down, and then putting an extra step to rinse another player and then get under the posts. I mean, I remember thinking this is a completely different level. I mean, I remember thinking, how could we ever play in a final? Because the speed of it and the intensity, it was just incredible. And obviously the fireworks, I'll never ever forget that, the intensity of that game. But I can only remember the Niue match. I couldn't even tell you who else who played.
Mark, you bring up Wellington. That actually, for me, a year later was my debut. And you're right, packed crowds, people going wild. They were more interested in the party, it seemed. And when New Zealand played, they would fill it out. But the people were going absolutely wild, which is disappointing these days to see that it's moved from there and not as crazy. But you talk about William Ryder. So quick point, would he rank in one of your top 3 most elusive players you've played against, sevens-wise?
He was magic to watch. But I think had we played against him with the squad that we had in our last year or two, you'd target him. He was, unfortunately, he wasn't strong there. And I remember the best sevens player I've ever seen in terms of when I was playing is Matthew Tate. For me, he was an incredible player. I remember them playing Fiji, and whether it was a final or whatever, but Willie Ryder made a break and he was going for the corner, and I remember Matthew Tate chasing him down. He caught him 5 meters out, he picked him up and threw him into touch, and then he threw the ball back into himself and he ran 95 meters and scored. But he was the all-round player because he was hungry. He had great skills, but he was also rapid, but he could repeat it. Him and the little blonde-haired South African scrum half, I think Basson or something.
Yes, Stefan Basson. Yeah, he was
a completely different level. He was rapid, but he was also just such a competitor.
Yeah,
an incredible competitor. You're like traditional 9, but I think he had everything. Those two would be not necessarily the most elusive, but up there with if I could pick people in my team, like he was a similar George Horn.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
just a winner.
Irritating like an ingrown hair, Stefan Basson, I remember him. Falsa, listen, you're 3rd place for the most tournaments by a Scottish sevens player alongside Andrew Turnbull with 57 events. So despite the injuries you picked up, you lasted a tremendous amount of time on the series. If you had to pick one tournament, and I think I know exactly which one you're going to pick, which one would be the most favorite of yours? And give us a little backstory.
Hong Kong for me. I remember running out the first time, and I was still injured, like I wasn't anywhere near the top of my game, but I remember running out and it had been a dream to play there. And when I first got injured, when I was 25 and I finished with the 15s, I thought I'd never have a chance, and I turned it down as well. I turned down when the Commonwealth Games were there, or I can't remember, there was something there that I turned down and I was gutted. And when I'd first gone through that adversity to get back, I remember running out and here standing on the back of my neck. And it's just the history. You know what it's like, Dallen. You're a rugby fan. Like as a kid, like I was fully invested in rugby. You know, I remember watching Christian Cullen and Jonah Lumo, my old man. Olden he got beat in the final at Hong Kong Sevens when it was like before it was that full international tournament and stuff. They went in the Scottish borders, and there's just so much history that it's hard to even explain the smell of the place. When you run out, the smell and the humidity and the stands, the picture behind it, it's so iconic. And unfortunately, I think that had a negative effect on our performances there, because I actually think that we became at times too emotional about it, and we missed out on quarterfinals a few times, having played brilliant games, but on the last few we missed out on quarterfinals because of silly decisions that were made due to a lack of clarity, and that can only come down to emotion. But I don't know what you think, but for me, it's special place.
Yeah, it is number one in my book as well. For me personally, the only thing that would rival that is just an emotional thing, like family or friends coming to watch. So I had my parents from South Africa flew into San Diego when the Sevens was there, and my wife's parents were there, and they'd never seen rugby in their whole life. So now they're watching, and they're like, why is nobody wearing pads? Why are people attacking each other? So they had a great time. So that was more emotional side. But you're right, any tournament, it's Hong Kong. I mean, I remember going as a fan many years before playing and being like, wow, this is the most epic experience. And it's hard to describe. When you're there, you get it. So it's hard to tell people what it is.
It should be on everybody's bucket list. That's the exact one that they say, if you get bored, you turn around and watch a rugby.
I do love that saying, exactly. But let's talk tries, my friend. Robin and I have scored a total of, we can raise one hand, and that's the number of tries we've scored for our country. You are one of 4 Scottish players to score more than 100 tries, and of your 106, is there one or two that stand above the rest?
Like, I loved scoring against England. There's one picture when we scored, we beat England in Hong Kong, I don't even know what year, I think it was 2014. And there's a picture of me with a massive smile on my face as I'm running in to score. And another one, we beat them in the semi-final, and there's a fair bit of history behind that. The semi-final in Paris in my second last tournament. Got a pass from Whitey behind me, unfortunately, Whitey, but it was effective. And I kicked the ball through Grubber with the left foot again and won the race to it. And there are little things like that you just get that little like rush of energy and emotion. But the only difference is, I think, as you get older, you can afford yourself to have that, because then when the ball's back in play, you've brought yourself back down and you're clear again. Rarely do you get the chance to really enjoy stuff when you're playing, because especially as you get older, you're so focused on your next job and actually trying to be as clear as possible and not get emotional. A lot of the tries for me are just like a blur. I mean, there was one against Fiji where we hammered them in you say at home in Murrayfield. A try there that I really enjoyed, because my best mate Roddy gave me the pass to score it. I don't know. I love scoring tries, but there weren't ones that really stood out for me.
But I do love how you said against England. So that I know what you're saying. There's a rivalry. You live on the borders. It's epic, man. Brilliant.
I love playing, and like we obviously in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, they were ranked above us, but I think we beat them probably 75% of the time. They really struggled against us. But maybe that was because we would raise our game to play against them, which some people could see as a negative and some people could see as a positive. But they just kind of stayed at the same sort of level. I don't think they were that bored about playing against us. We were just any other team. Whereas for us, obviously, we're like, we're going to kill you.
Well, that's the brilliant thing about Sevens, especially with those new audiences, is, you can watch Scotland play England, and then you can watch New Zealand, Australia, Canada, US, or you got the Polynesian countries or the South American countries. And if they're playing whoever, it might not be that big of a game, but if it's a head-to-head, like we had Todd Cleaver on the other day, and my biggest game of my life was Friday night, Hong Kong, Canada, USA, and I don't think there was any rugby even played. It was just full-on head smashing. Like our coaches were probably losing their marbles on the sideline because nobody was playing game plan. It was just all blood. But that's the best part about it for the athletes as well as the people in the crowd. So let's go off the field with Sevens. What was one of your worst mates for roommates on tour?
James Fleming, because he was a nightmare for snoring, an absolute nightmare. And then you had Scott Riddle, who Riddler was he liked to go to bed at 9 o'clock and he wore his eye mask. He's the only guy I've ever known that it's him that turns down his wife. His wife said, "I know that that Scott's not interested because at 9 o'clock he's wearing his eye mask." But like, I had to come home He loved this. I honestly had this special eye mask, and he'd done a couple of pranks on me. Like, horrible man has got a hairy back, and I like my room to be clean, and he shaved his back hair and left it in my bath. So I was raging. So anyway, I had to fly all the way to Vancouver, spend the night in Vancouver, and then fly home. Got into Riddler's room, and I got my little scalpel, and I cut his eye mask until there was one thread left, and I took great joy because his roommate was like, Riddler had got into bed, he was ready to go, he was really excited with his eye mask, and he went to put it on, it just stretched too far, ding, snapped, and he said he was absolutely gutted, and he couldn't sleep. He was OCD, he could not sleep. And the nice thing is, obviously, he couldn't get me back, but he'd shaved his back hair 3 months earlier, but I don't forget these sort of things, and I was always going to get him back.
Oh, that is one of the best stories you ever heard, and I definitely won't do anything to get you in the future.
So moving on to the Olympic Games, super epic, obviously, for you to be a part of that with Great Britain and coming out with a silver. What was it like trialing and the whole selection process, and then ultimately representing Great Britain?
The trial was awesome. It was really, really tough. It was brutal, but it was like your first day at school. You went in and there's all these boys, mainly English. I love the Welsh, but mainly English. Like said Norton, like I used to think. I looked at him and I was like, "You're a scared little mouse." I mean, he is a scared little mouse, but I thought he was the quietest guy in the world. Dan Norton is hands down the loudest man I've ever met in my life. Like the highest energy individual you'll ever meet. Like brilliant bloke. And you've got these perceptions of people like Rodwell. I was like, and I can say this now because they're good friends. I was like, beforehand I was like arrogant bugger and all this stuff, and the most down to earth, gentle giant, kind of goofy, but like just a great bloke. And Dan Bibby as well. Like, you obviously have these perceptions of the English because their English was terrible. That's when you're younger, but we ended up becoming, a lot of us, really, really close. Everybody just got on so well. But Simon Amor is a really, really intelligent coach. There were so many perceived negatives from the outside, given the fact that we hadn't played together. They said we hadn't had the talent that other teams had, the firepower. We were having to play competition, so we'd be fatigued. And his ability to put all those into positives in terms of, they haven't. I remember he put all them on the screen. So he wrote, look at all these headlines, negatives. And the first thing he did the first one was he'd not had any time together. He'd never played together. And he was like, well, we're the only team going into the tournament who nobody can prepare for, because nobody's seen us play before. So that was the first one. The second one was you've got no firepower. The next thing he did was he obviously played a highlights reel of everybody that was involved. That was in the first day. So everybody got confidence in their teammates because he showed the strengths that they were bringing, whether it was a Riddler and a Phil Burgess winning ball at the breakdown or not scoring tries or whatever it might be. So Dan, and the last point was obviously these boys are going to be absolutely broken by the time they get to the Olympics. And he was like, the opposite of that, we're going to be game hardened. All these guys are going to have been like wrapped up in cotton wool and not hardened to what they're going to experience. And what happened, we didn't get one guy injured during the tournament. New Zealand lost most of their key players. We got one guy injured before the tournament, which was absolutely brutal. He was meant to start. He didn't even get to come down in the village. But his ability to make sure everybody had an understanding of how the opportunity that we had, all the perceived negatives as well when you're in the village, know about them, be prepared for them, and make sure we make the most out of it and make it one of our strengths. Also, how you wanted to find out, because we had to play 4 tournaments. We're split into 2 different teams because there were 36 or 40 of us at times, split into 2 different teams, and we're always played against each other, obviously, normally in the finals of the European tournaments. But then before the last tournament, we had to find out on the Tuesday night. He said, how is everybody going to react? We need to know, will you be willing to play if you find out that you're not going to be involved? And if you are going to be involved, are you going to be worried about playing because you don't want to get injured? because we need to prepare for this, because there's only 12 places. There's going to be a lot of disappointed people. We have to raise this beforehand. So we went into groups and obviously talked about it. And these things that sound like simple things, but they're so valuable, because then you've all had the opportunity to speak up and discuss it and raise your concerns. And we ended up going in an alphabetical order when we found out that we were going to be selected. And you went in one door, and so that you didn't have to see anybody, you went out the next door, and then you obviously didn't train afterwards. You didn't have to see anybody afterwards. And then we came together the next day for some fun, like games on the pitch. Yeah, that was an amazing experience. I mean, you just because you're meeting new mates and stuff like that, and it's really challenging. You know, it was like a trial every day where we weren't necessarily knocking lumps out of each other, but whether it was a Bronco test, we'd start every Monday with a continuous 1200 metre, not a Bronco, but 1200s in a row. You've got a competition. You've got, like, we had the gates out. You'd be doing 10 metres. You'd be doing high ball stuff where you were in teams and competitions. So you just put so much competition into it, which made it challenging. But yeah, it was a pretty special experience, the actual training camp.
Well, I love that you mentioned Simon Amor and what he brought to it, because from the outside, you're right, everybody looking in thought this would be a real challenge and didn't expect Great Britain to do well at all. So let's go to the actual tournament itself. Can you talk us through what you remember about the knockout stages and some of your memories around that?
I'll be as honest as I possibly can be. And the tournament for me, in terms of the rugby side of things, I didn't enjoy it. You know, I was playing. I knew that right from the start, from the conversations that I had with Simon, even in Hong Kong before it, when he was speaking to me, just asking me little probing questions, I knew that he saw me as somebody that was going to be coming on as an impact player. And I had that feeling from the start. But I was coming on with six minutes. I was getting a decent bit of time. Obviously, the final was gone with 10 minutes. And the way the games were going, we were up by half time. And then the game had swung, and we were defending for a lot of time in the second half. Like, I'd made all these goals and this preparation to get there, and I wanted to be able to express myself. And I was going to retire after the Olympic. You know, I rarely got the ball where I was having an opportunity to take people on. And yeah, you won a silver medal, but I was really annoyed. I was pissed off because I hadn't had the chance to express myself and give what I wanted to give. And you know what that's like. It just gives you fire in your belly, because from not wanting to play the following year, I made myself some tough goals. I set myself and went on to that next season. But after the games, we stayed for 5 days, and that was a different level in Rio.
Well, I bet. I suppose we'll keep it clean for this podcast, because we know who your squad members were. All I'll say is that is the remarkable thing about the community of rugby, that you played against folks from the other unions, and then you came together as one team and did so well, you know. And I do get what you're saying. The actual tournament itself might not have been the great thing, but so many good memories that you have, you know.
So many good memories, but that's the thing. Like, I'd rather be honest. I was obviously delighted to win a silver medal and delighted for the team. But you start playing the game and you get to where you want to get to, because you're a competitive athlete and you set yourself individual targets. And naturally, even when you're in a team, you try and pull the team along to get to where you want to get to. Like, fortunately, we're in the last 2 years in the Scotland team, we're a senior group of players who were very, very determined to actually achieve something. So we were all in the same boat. So those youngsters were naturally just like dragged. You've not got an option. You either hit the level we're asking you to hit, or you're not here. You know, and that obviously benefits them as well, because, as I say, we created a culture that was really enjoyable to be a part of, but we created real accountability throughout the group. That was mainly created from Kitty, to change the way the squad sort of focused and I suppose challenged themselves completely.
So we're getting to the last few questions here, but I do want to quickly share a memory. I have an embarrassing moment for me as a commentator. So one of the things is, you know, because you and I have commentated together at a few tournaments, is you obviously want to get the players' names right. And there's, you know, as you mentioned, Scott Riddell or Riddle, and he changed how you should say the name every now and again. So that's tough. But my embarrassing moment is, when I saved your phone number in my phone, I don't know why I was thinking, but I wrote your last name as Robertson. Obviously, I know you. I played against you, everything else. But, you know, when it comes to commentating, you're like, there's so much going on. The director's in your ear and everything else. And so, Robin, you're going to love this. So when I introduce my color commentator, what do I say on the air? Not just once, for 3 games in a row. I go, next to me is the Scottish legend and Great Britain sensation, Mark Robertson. But he didn't say anything. He didn't say, hey, Dallen, hey, you accidentally messed up my name. So he keeps quiet about it. I got to find out later. Someone's like, you're saying his name wrong. I'm like, oh, God. So I want to apologize to everybody listening and to you, my friend.
I enjoyed it, to be honest. Again, it's a key to being a commentator is doing your research. He got my flipping surname wrong, and he got my date of birth wrong. I mean, what is this all about?
Listen. I will send you.
Luckily, he's got good energy.
Listen, I will send you the link that has your information, which has almost everything right except your birthday. And I don't know how they can get that wrong, but maybe just because you're a party machine, they're like, he's got to be born on the 31st.
Well, I don't know. Dallen might be able to pull it off with his accent. Maybe the Scotsman just thought that's how they say it in Cape Town. Just roll with it. Let's go into your coaching bit here. So you're the co-founder of the School of Sevens. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, just myself and Scotty White. Obviously, we grew up in Melrose. When you're in Melrose, you constantly play sevens. So we've got a load of tournaments that go on throughout the summer. And obviously with the Melrose Sevens, and then we'd both gone on to play for Scotland. And we just thought we'd set up a business and try and give back to a fair few kids. And it's been great. We just run them. We run them in the summers. We've done a few coach workshops. We've been asked to try and develop it, but you know what it's like. It's White is busy at work, and I'm busy as well. So we've kind of kept it to the point where we'll do 3 3D camps every year in the summer, and it's been good fun. We just get different coaches down, different international players. We try and get as many PE teachers in as well, and yeah, it's just good fun.
That's a great initiative, and it's it gives those athletes where you're from something to look forward to as well. And how did you land your gig in France, and what was it like there before the lockdown?
So I was doing the assistant or the backs S&C for the Scottish 15s team for the 2 years when I finished, which was obviously a crazy gig to get when you just finished playing. But I was supposed to take over the Scotland Sevens strength and conditioning manager, and fortunately I ended up not being put into that role. I think it was a blessing in disguise. So I went there, and then I was doing the academy at the same time as the Scotland S&C and doing a bit of obviously nutrition, strength and conditioning, and a fair bit of rugby coaching as well. And they ended up asking me if Claremont asked would I be interested in coming over, what my sort of experience and education fitted what they wanted for. And I thought, well, I'll come over and have a little look. And honestly, you come over here and you go to their stadium, and it is unbelievable. Like, obviously their training centre is amazing, but it's a place as a player you would just love to have played, because they get 18,000 people week in, week out. The bands that are playing, the noise, it's multicultural, because Michelin, the tyre company, that's where it was really founded, the club. It was founded through Michelin for their employees to be doing as much sport as possible. As a town, it's nice. It's perceived as quite an industrial town, but loads of mountains round about. You're 3 hours to the Alps, 3 hours to the Pyrenees as well. Like, it's just, you've got skiing everywhere. Cheese is very good, and obviously the wine and stuff's good too. And the people, it's just a totally different culture. So I've loved it, and the role itself's been really good for me, because they've given me quite a lot of freedom. So I'm heavily involved in coordinating the rehabilitation side of things, but then also programming, but then doing a lot with the backs in terms of specifically evasion. So evasion, and I'll do handling warm-ups and stuff. So it's almost been a perfect fit for the kind of things that I wanted to do.
Oh, that's awesome. And just for the listeners out there, I've never heard Canada's a bilingual country. I speak fluent French, and for all those bilingual Canadians out there, you got to give us a line or two en français.
What would I say? So, j'ai fait le préparateur physique pour Clermont-Ferrand. J'adore la ville, j'adore les personnes ici, la nourriture. Très bon aussi. J'ai mangé beaucoup pendant ma reste ici. C'est bon.
Perfect. You nailed it.
There's a fair few errors in there, but yeah, as I said, like, the biggest thing, I think, I don't know about you, Robin, but obviously you're fluent in French, but the biggest thing is the verbs and the conjugation side of things. So once you've learned 8 or 9 of the basic verbs, and you can use je, tu, il, on, nous, vous, and then the plural, in terms of the plurals, it makes a huge difference. But I've loved learning the language, and I hope that after 2 years, I'm very confident in terms of my understanding, and also just to be able to hold a conversation.
Well, that's a good basis for you. And, one thing I found, I spent a year in France and a year in Italy, and I didn't speak Italian. And what I found is if you're willing to try and you're putting in the work like you are, just like an athlete, when you're putting in the work, that goes a long way. And you got to immerse yourself in the culture. And from my time working with Mexico for 5-6 years, I wasn't very fluent in Spanish, but just, we gain way more from those experiences than they even do. And then for you, you're raising a young family there too. How is that for your wife and your kids?
Yeah, it's been great for the girls. I've got 2 girls, and the next door neighbours, they're constantly shouting back and forth, and especially the youngest one, she's like me. She'll just speak, she'll just chat. So I have to be able to speak because I love to speak. And she's the same. So she's half the time she makes up words. I'm pretty good at making up words as well. But it's been an awesome experience for them, because it's just a different culture, and they do pick it up. Their understanding, probably, I think it'll be more advanced than mine, but they always say that they don't know what they're saying. But then you go into the classroom and the teacher's asking questions in French, and they're putting their hands up and responding back. But then if they see you looking, then they'll stop.
Well, speaking of making things up and stuff, you've done several speaking engagements. Is there a favorite story, rugby story, or story you like to tell that gets the crowd going?
In all honesty, my speaking engagements are normally the motivational side of things. So I'll normally go into a corporate side of things and share experience and transferable skills, because I find after I've done a few after dinner speeches, and it's just I'm not a great storyteller. I kind of avoid that as much as possible. Something that sort of stands out as one that I would be that would be my go-to. What's your go-to?
Well, no, I actually don't do a lot of speaking engagements per se, not yet, but maybe later. But I tell you what, having your Scottish accent, I will say, gives you at least 50%, foot up from anybody else, because it's so engaging and so lovely. And some of the best commentators of all time have all been Scottish, right? So even when you're commentating and I'm sitting next to you, I'm just listening to your accent and what you're saying, and pure class, my friend, pure class.
The commentary is a funny thing, Dallen. Obviously, you put masses of energy into it. You've got a unique way of doing it too, which is unique to you, which is really important. I think you need that time in the saddle to do it. I enjoyed it. I was meant to do Hong Kong again this year, so I was gutted I'd have done it with you. But it's a funny one. You have to have so much variation in terms of your one-liners, and that's the biggest challenge, is to not repeat yourself. It's easier for us because we can give little bits of insight, and you can plan. It's always changing, and you see the game as you see the game different from most of the public. Without being derogatory, we've played the game for so much, we've trained so much, you see the game differently, so you can give bits of insight. But it's getting that balance, isn't it, between having the fun and the seriousness, and that's what you and the big Aussie do so well.
Oh, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you. But no, seriously, it's such a pleasure speaking to you, Mark, and the skinny fat sensation, the Scottish and Great Britain legend. Just a real treat to have you on the Rugby Hive podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure to speak so well. No doubt, it's a nice balance the two of you have got there. Hey guys, and listen, thank you very much for the offer to have me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, pal. Be safe outside. Look after your family, and always great to see you, my friend.
Beautiful ball over the top. Yes, Seppo!
Thank you for listening, you sleek sensations.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to Rugby Hive Podcast and catch us on all the socials at Rugby Hive.
We appreciate your support. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.
They've taken the lunch money from South Africa, and off